My husband's terrible secret came out a month after we got married. Now divorce feels like the only option. You think you know someone, especially the person you've married, but sometimes the truth can be more shocking than you ever anticipated. This is the reality for a woman who, just a month after tying the knot, found herself confronted with a revelation that would change everything. What was supposed to be the start of a new chapter in her life has quickly turned into an emotional nightmare, leaving her questioning everything she thought she knew about her husband. As time went on, I convinced myself that the accusation was nothing more than a misunderstanding, maybe even an exaggeration. His family was adamant in their support of him, and as much as I didn't want to, I couldn't help but let their voices sway me. After all, this was a family who knew him better than anyone, right? They had all stood by him for years, and here I was, just coming into the picture. He had always been kind, gentle, and respectful with me. I never saw any signs of aggression, manipulation, or behavior that would make me think he was capable of something like that. He was, in my eyes, everything a partner should be: loving, patient, and understanding. He didn't show any of the typical signs of someone who might carry the weight of such an accusation. So I chose to believe him. I thought to myself, if he says he didn't do it, then that's enough for me. I didn't want to question the man I loved. 2 years into our relationship, I was certain I had made the right choice. I knew his past wasn't perfect, and no one's is, but what mattered was who he was now. I would never have married him if I had any real doubts about his character. So when we got engaged, I thought this was it, the start of a beautiful future. Our relationship had been built on a foundation of trust, respect, and mutual support. I wasn't just marrying a man, I was marrying someone I believed in, someone who had shown me love and dedication from day one. The wedding was everything I had dreamed of. It felt like the culmination of everything we had built together. A promise of a life filled with love, growth, and happiness. But as it turns out, 1 month into this new chapter, everything would change. What I thought was a perfect relationship suddenly felt like a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. The truth about my husband's past, the one thing he had kept buried for years, was about to resurface, and it would shatter everything I thought I knew about him. I was completely unprepared for what came next. The days that followed that conversation were a blur. I felt like I was walking through life in a fog, unable to fully grasp the reality of what had just been revealed to me. Every time I looked at my husband, I saw the man I loved, but I also saw the person who had hidden this dark truth for so long. The betrayal I felt wasn't just about the action itself. It was about the lies, the secrets, and the fact that he had kept something so significant from me. Something that, in hindsight, I should have known. I tried to process it all, but the more I thought about it, the harder it became to breathe. It was as if the weight of his confession had crushed every bit of peace I had once felt in our marriage. I couldn't stop replaying the details in my mind, how he had touched his cousin, how he had denied it for years, and how it all came out now, only because of the situation with his son. I couldn't stop asking myself, why did it take this long for him to admit the truth? What else was he hiding? What made it even more complicated was that his admission about his cousin only added to the troubling behavior we were now dealing with in his son. I couldn't ignore the fact just days before I had heard that his son had touched another child inappropriately. It felt like a pattern I couldn't escape, like a mirror reflecting something that was much deeper and darker than I had ever imagined. As much as I wanted to believe that my husband was a changed man, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. I wondered if his actions were somehow linked, if there was something that ran through his family, something that made both him and his son capable of such inappropriate behavior. Was this just an isolated incident, or was there something more to it? I had no answers, only questions that haunted me. I could see the guilt in my husband's eyes as he apologized over and over again, telling me how sorry he was, how much he regretted the mistakes he made. He said he never meant for any of this to happen, and that he had been struggling with shame for years, trying to bury it all and move forward. But no matter how many times he apologized, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. The truth, once revealed, couldn't be easily erased. We talked about therapy. He suggested we go together, that maybe a counselor could help us work through this. But even though part of me wanted to believe that we could fix this, that we could somehow repair what had been broken, another part of me felt disgusted. I couldn't stop picturing the young boy involved in the karate incident, wondering how he must have felt. I felt sick to my stomach thinking about what could have caused this in the first place. And I couldn't help but wonder if I was being naive in thinking that therapy could undo what had already been done. I tried to remind myself of the man I had married, the person who had been kind and loving toward me. But every time I thought about it, I couldn't separate him from the person who had kept this dark secret from me, from the person who had done something so wrong. The shame I felt for staying with him, for believing in him, was overwhelming. How could I stay with a man who had lied to me for years, who had hidden such a painful truth? And even more troubling, how could I trust that he was capable of being a good father to his children if he had failed to be honest about his own past? The weight of it all made me feel sick. I couldn't look at my husband without feeling conflicted. Part of me still loved him, but the other part felt like I was suffocating under the weight of the truth he had kept from me. Every time I thought we might be able to move forward, something inside me pulled me back, reminding me of the lies and the deception. I found myself torn between wanting to make it work and wondering if I could ever truly trust him again. Divorce felt like the only option that would bring me peace, but I was scared of what it meant for the future, scared of losing the man I once thought I knew. Yet, the more I thought about everything he had confessed, the more I realized that I might not even know who he truly was. Was I still in love with him, or was I in love with the person I thought he was? I had an appointment with a therapist scheduled, hoping they could help me sort through my feelings and guide me toward a decision. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about therapy. It was about trust. And once that was broken, I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. When my husband admitted to what he had done all those years ago, it was like my world shattered in an instant. I could barely process his words at first. It felt like my heart had stopped beating, and everything I had once believed in came crashing down around me. The love I had for him didn't just evaporate, but it felt warped, twisted by the weight of the truth that had just been exposed. I had spent years trusting him, building a life with him, and believing in the man he showed me. He was everything I thought I wanted, caring, attentive, and someone who seemed to genuinely have a good heart. To hear him confess to something so awful, something I never thought he was capable of, left me feeling betrayed in a way I can't fully describe. But what hurt the most wasn't just the act itself. It was the years of lies, the deception, the silence. All the years he spent hiding this from me. He had lied about it so convincingly, and I had believed him without question. I had invested so much into our relationship, so much trust and love, and now I felt foolish. I kept asking myself, how could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? I realized that the man I thought I knew, the man I married, was not the same person who had hurt his cousin all those years ago. That version of him had been hidden behind the mask of a loving, caring husband. The guilt I felt for staying with him after hearing the truth was suffocating. How could I have loved someone who had done something so horrible? It wasn't just about the past, it was about everything that came after. He didn't just make a mistake and own up to it right away. He kept it hidden, brushed it aside, and lived a life built on lies. He lied to me, he lied to everyone who trusted him, and I had been one of those people. I felt disgusted, not just by the act he had committed, but by the fact that I had been deceived for so long. But here's the thing. Despite the anger, despite the hurt, I still loved him. Or at least I thought I did. I was torn between the person he was to me, the man I had shared my life with, the man I had laughed with, cried with, and dreamed with, and the person who had done something so wrong and kept it buried for so long. I couldn't reconcile these two versions of him. They didn't fit together, and I didn't know how to make them fit. The internal struggle I faced was overwhelming. Part of me wanted to hold on, to fix things, to try and rebuild the relationship I thought we had. I loved him, and I didn't want to throw everything away. But then, the other part of me couldn't stop thinking about the truth. How could I ever look at him the same way again? How could I trust him after he had kept such a dark secret for all these years? I kept wondering if I could ever feel safe with him again. If I could ever look at him and not be reminded of what he had done, of the betrayal that now weighed heavily on our marriage. The most painful part of all this was the realization that our future together might not be possible. I wasn't sure if I could keep going, living a life with someone who had done something so horrible. And then there was the issue of his son. The revelation about his son's troubling behavior during karate class only made things more complicated. I found myself asking the hardest question of all. Could my husband, the same man who had done something so wrong as a teenager, really be a good father? How could I allow someone who had hidden such a secret from me, someone who had made such a terrible mistake in the past, to raise children? Our children, his son, and my future kids. Parenthood wasn't just about love and care. It was about responsibility, about leading by example, about being someone who could offer safety, guidance, and emotional support. I wasn't sure that the man I was married to was capable of being that person. I wasn't sure he could be the father I wanted for my future children, someone who could give them the love, trust, and protection they needed. Every time I thought about the way he had handled his past actions, the way he had kept his secret for so long, I couldn't help but wonder how he would handle being a father. Would he be honest with them? Would he be able to protect them from making the same mistakes? I wasn't sure, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. I tried to look at the situation through a lens of understanding, thinking maybe therapy would help him heal. Maybe it could fix everything. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't sure I could live with the constant fear, the constant doubt about who he really was. Could I trust him to be the man I thought I married? Or was he someone entirely different? Someone I couldn't share my future with? The weight of this realization was crushing. I had come to the heartbreaking conclusion that no matter how much I loved him, I couldn't ignore the fact that the trust was gone. And without trust, what did we have? Was it even worth trying to rebuild a relationship that had been built on a lie? It felt like I was standing at a crossroads, unsure which path to take. On one hand, there was the man I loved, the person I thought I knew, and on the other, there was the harsh reality of what he had done and how that had changed everything. I was lost, I was confused, I was hurt, and I didn't know what to do next. I never imagined that 1 month into my marriage, I would be facing such a monumental decision. The thought of divorce was something I had always associated with failure, with giving up on a relationship. But now, here I was, completely lost and unsure of what my future would look like. A month ago, I was walking down the aisle, excited about the life I was about to start with the man I loved. Now, I was standing at a crossroads, overwhelmed with questions and doubts. Everything that once felt so secure and right now seemed fragile and broken. I kept replaying our wedding day in my mind, remembering the joy and the excitement I felt. But those happy memories were now clouded by the crushing weight of what had been revealed. It was hard to look back on that day without feeling like I had missed something, like there was something I should have seen. I loved him. I truly did. But the truth he had kept from me, the lies that had been buried for so long, made me question everything. Could I really stay with him, knowing what I now knew? Could I trust him again, after everything he had hidden from me? The idea of living with that constant doubt, the fear of what might be lurking beneath the surface, was more than I could handle. I didn't want to live in a relationship where I was constantly questioning his honesty, his integrity, or his past. And yet, the thought of walking away from everything we had built together felt like an impossible decision. How could I just throw away the life I thought we had? How could I end a marriage so soon after starting it? The guilt I felt about even considering divorce was overwhelming. I kept telling myself that if I just tried harder, if we went to therapy, maybe we could work through it. But even as I thought that, I knew deep down that some things couldn't be undone. The trust between us had been broken, and I wasn't sure how or if it could ever be repaired. I was torn between wanting to make it work and the overwhelming desire to protect myself from more pain. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that therapy could help us navigate this difficult situation, but I also knew that I couldn't ignore my own emotional needs, my own sense of self-worth. I didn't want to live in a relationship where I was constantly questioning the person beside me, wondering if he was being honest or hiding something else. So, I made the difficult decision to schedule a therapy appointment. I thought that maybe a professional could help me sort through all of the emotions I was feeling. Help me understand if there was any chance of healing, or if it was time to move on. I needed guidance, clarity, and a way to make sense of everything that had happened. At that moment, therapy felt like the only thing that might give me the tools I needed to navigate this nightmare. Maybe, just maybe, it would give me the answers I was looking for. But alongside therapy, I also knew I couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. Divorce was something I had to seriously consider. I wasn't sure if I was ready to go down that path, but I had to take steps to protect myself. I couldn't just keep ignoring the truth. So I reached out to a divorce lawyer. I hadn't told my husband yet, but I knew that I needed to understand my options. I needed to know what my future would look like if I decided to walk away from this marriage. The thought of speaking to a lawyer, of making divorce a real possibility, was heartbreaking. It felt like a betrayal, even though it was my choice. It was like I was acknowledging that the love I once thought was strong and unshakable had crumbled. I kept asking myself if I was overreacting. Was I being too harsh? Maybe the truth could be forgiven. Maybe we could rebuild. But deep down, I knew I had to be honest with myself. I couldn't ignore how deeply I had been hurt, how much trust had been lost. I was so conflicted. One part of me wanted to give him another chance, to believe in the man he had become, to hope that therapy would help us heal. But the other part of me, the part that had been betrayed, couldn't forget what he had done and how he had lied to me for so long. Every time I thought about it, I felt like I was drowning in my own emotions, unsure of what the right thing to do was. So I kept going back and forth, thinking about divorce, thinking about therapy, thinking about everything that had led me to this point. My mind was spinning, and every decision seemed like it carried a weight I wasn't sure I could bear. All I knew for certain was that I couldn't live in this limbo forever. I had to make a choice, and that choice would shape the rest of my life. But I still wasn't sure if I was strong enough to make it. Staying in a relationship after discovering such a devastating truth has taken a huge emotional toll on me. It's like carrying a heavy weight everywhere I go. The trust I thought we had, the connection I believed was unbreakable, was shattered in an instant. And now, no matter how much I try to move forward, that broken trust follows me like a shadow. How do you rebuild from something like this? How do you move forward when the very foundation of your relationship is cracked? It's hard to describe how it feels. I thought I knew the person I married. I thought I understood who he was, that the man I loved would never hurt anyone, let alone carry such a dark secret. But now, everything feels like a lie, and every memory of us together is tainted by what he's admitted. What's even harder is the feeling of complicity. By staying by his side for so long, by believing his version of the story, I feel like I've been part of the lie. I wonder if I should have questioned things earlier. Could I have seen through the facade? Was I too naive to realize what was really happening? It's not just the betrayal of trust that hurts, it's the guilt that comes with it. I feel ashamed of myself for not recognizing the signs, for standing by him when I should have listened to my instincts. I feel guilty for believing in someone who, in the end, wasn't honest with me. The shame eats at me every day. How could I have ignored the accusation all those years ago? How could I have convinced myself that everything was fine when, deep down, I knew something didn't feel right? I feel like I should have been stronger, that I should have seen the truth before it came crashing down on me. It's easy to blame myself, to ask myself why I didn't do more. But the truth is, no one can prepare for something like this. When you love someone, you trust them. You don't expect the person you're with to have such a dark side, to carry secrets that could change everything. And yet, here I am, reeling from the reality of what I've discovered. But I know that I can't keep living in this emotional chaos. I can't keep carrying the burden of shame and guilt. The road to healing for me has to start with taking care of myself. Therapy is helping, even if it's just a little bit. It's giving me a chance to talk through my emotions, to understand that I'm not the one at fault here. Yes, I made the decision to stay with him, but that doesn't make me responsible for his actions. I've also come to realize that healing starts with prioritizing my own emotional and mental well-being. It's okay to make tough decisions. It's okay to walk away if that's what's best for me. Healing doesn't mean staying in a toxic relationship just because you think you owe it to someone. It's about recognizing your worth and making choices that align with who you are and what you need. If anyone watching this is facing a similar situation, I want you to know that you're not alone. You don't have to feel trapped in a situation that makes you feel small, guilty, or ashamed. You deserve love, honesty, and respect. Healing starts with recognizing your own worth and taking the steps to protect your emotional health, whether that's through therapy, setting boundaries, or even walking away from a toxic relationship. You don't have to carry the burden of someone else's actions. It's okay to put yourself first. The road to healing is long, and it's filled with tough decisions, but in the end, the most important thing is that you find peace with yourself.